Welcome back, and let's start the discussion. Is Jeremy back here? Okay. So let's start with group number one, and let's see what kind of questions do you answer and the discussion.
Hello, everyone. This is Holly. I'll report back for our group. So I'll go backwards and that this symposium was really great for how the society can help engage climate research and climate initiatives. So this was a great step towards achieving that. When going towards implementing assisted migration, folks chatted about resistance about it, how open folks may or may not be. I think, again, it's going to the idea of moving whole species and maybe species even outside of your region, your country, and going afar, and those concerns about invasive potential. And so working with communities so they understand what you're moving, why you're moving, and maybe just moving small population small distances, whether that be in elevation or latitude, and taking in a number of factors to be considered. And then in terms of, scientific information, this was really just wanting more questions, really getting down to that, wanting more answers to a variety of questions of which species, how far can we move it, what's appropriate, and getting much more species specific information would be helpful to folks. So I will leave it there.
Any questions for group number one? So I have a question. Is there any guidance for assisted migration? Because we have talked and different groups have said, different speakers have said something about assisted migration. And my question is, maybe and perhaps not only for group number one, for all the groups, are there any guidance that we can share?
Yes. Is the short answer. Is it the right guidance? Is it perfect? No, but I mean, there is guidance out there, and different groups take different perspectives. There is the seed lot selection tool that's focused on tree species, but shows a number of climate variables that are important to plants and gives a general rule of thumb of about 2 degrees Celsius, unless there is species specific information. There's also provisional seed zones and then transferring among those. So I can share information in the chat about that. But I know there's other tools out there and other options to help guide assisted migration.
That would be great if you could share that in the chat.
So just to kind of follow up on what Holly's saying right there too, I spent a lot of time talking to people across California and Oregon about assisted gene flow and getting their perspectives on it. And let me tell you, if just going throughout the Forest Service and picking up people from different districts and talking to them about it, they have very different perspectives on how likely they are to do assisted gene flow and what guidelines they want to use and how much information is necessary before they're willing to do it. I can tell you that the people in, for instance, Yosemite National Park are incredibly hesitant to transport anything into, for instance, their national park. Whereas the district that I do my research in Willamette, they're often very progressive in nature in this. They've been doing this with forestry for a long period of time, and they have started to move like 30 or 40 different herbaceous species in kind of trials at different locations already. The amount of information that they needed to get to confirm those was very, very different. So I think that the guidelines are there. The seed lot selection tool is wonderful, but from Sally's talk as well, I don't think we know exactly what we should be measuring or have a complete idea for what we should be moving around. Or I don't think that there are just like guidelines in practice for like, okay, you can't do that, you can do this. It's a lot about who you ask in those different localities and what kind of justification you have.
Thank you. And with that, let's move to this group number two, because there was a lot of discussion about that, exactly what you're saying, Nick.
We had very good discussions in group number two. In fact, I couldn't possibly do them all justice. We had so many good conversations, but I'm going to highlight, for sake of time, just two things that came up that seemed particularly salient today. One, when we're thinking about tools other than assisted migration, what's kind of out there. We had a very good conversation about vegetation salvage and how that could be expanded, where a botanist comes into a construction site pre-construction, surveys, and is able to take out plugs of vegetation, including soil and microbiota and everything, and use those for downstream restoration projects. And we talked about the need, if there's one or not one out there, for a kind of database for maybe people who are undergoing these kind of restoration projects, interested in doing them, but need to be linked up with a salvage somewhere or something like that. So a great tool to think about. And then the second point that kind of kept coming up in different ways is how hard some species are to grow. And that came up for a few reasons. In one context, we were talking about the extent to which people's native pollinator gardens help or don't help global efforts, and how those are dominated by specific native species. That probably has a lot to do with how readily seeds germinate and how long they stay good, for example. So that then also came up in the context of assisted migration, and how certainly some plants are going to be more sensitive at the roots to soil chemistry and mycorrhizae and microbiota in general, and how that may or may not dictate what studies are done on which species when we're thinking about assisted migration. So the fact that some species are hard to grow keeps coming back in actually, I think, a really important way. Those are two things I think we should highlight. If you have questions, that's great. Couldn't do all the conversations justice. That was really a fun group to be in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for group number 2? If not, let's move to group number 3.
So I'll report from group 3. We tackled 2 questions. The first was, what scientific information is most needed by practitioners to confidently implement strategies that prepare for climate change? So we pointed out a few. One is the need for local scale predictions of climate change, as opposed to larger global scale models. Second was the need to monitor populations over time, so we know actually which species are declining and are of need of some kind of management. And the third was the lack of restoration practices, restoration protocols that work. There are protocols for restoring shortgrass prairie, for example, and routinely only a subset of the plant species establish. And then we kind of went slightly off topic and talked about how to better engage the general public and the need for better communication between scientists and the general public, garden clubs, native plant societies, public schools, and different strategies that might work for that. And then we jump to how can BSA and other scientific societies engage in climate research and climate initiatives. And the direction we took with that is maybe the society is most valuable in convening meetings such as this one that bring together people from different fields. And so bring botanists that are typically members and attendees of botany meetings with, for example, restoration practitioners, or with people that study climate impacts or climate resilience of plants, or people that are focused on individual species, practitioners of conservation and other stakeholders that typically won't be going to a botany meeting, but an online meeting where there's no travel cost, makes it a lot more feasible. And several people in the group pointed out the benefits of these online meetings. They are low cost or free to the participants. People can sort of still be getting credit for doing their desk job on the days that they're participating. So that this week's meeting might be a good model for sort of paired meetings. And then we realized there's a lot of things that you only get from a face-to-face meeting. There's informal conversations. So hybrid meetings or online meetings that are followed by local subgroups that meet face-to-face are some of the suggestions that were made.
Thank you. Any questions for group number 3? Or comments?
All great ideas.
Okay, if not, Jeremy, any other thoughts?
Just thank you to everybody. I think this was really fantastic and a huge showing of support to maybe a kind of a new community or a new subset of an existing community, I suppose. Thank you.
I really appreciate the participation and the willingness to share the knowledge and be so candid about their problems and the concerns as well as successes. With this, I want to thank all the speakers. I know that some of them I have gone already, but I want to thank all of them. They have done a fantastic job, not only presenting, but also sharing with us those important knowledge and contributions that in other ways, you know, and having a platform like this being interactive, we will not be able to hear, to listen and to start the conversation or continue the conversation. Because the magnitude of this changing climate is very high and we don't know all the answers. I think that we have a lot of to do. We have a lot of ways to perhaps do the research that we have. And we heard yesterday about local adaptations and the performance, how it influence the performance of the species and populations. We heard that multiple years of data and large sets of data are important, but they're so hard to get. And perhaps, you know, out there we can collaborate and tap into those large data sets and those plots out there to continue the conversations. They're very little in terms of native, local, narrow endemics. And I think that that is an important gap that it needs to expand the type of research that has been discussed here. We have, I like one slide yesterday said, the climate is changing. So that's a conclusion, the climate is changing, and it is true. But we have topics about assisted gene flow, and we still don't understand it completely, how that will affect the species that we work with and the population that we work with. I think that there's a lot of room to work and collaborate together. As Sally said, careful with translocation and long-lived species. And I think that we have to take that in consideration. So I appreciate all of this, and I want to restate our gratitude to all of you for being here, participating, and sharing.
Thank you. This was unbelievably awesome.
Thank you.
Heather, you want to say a couple of things?
Well, I just want to reiterate what a wonderful 2 days it has been. And I think, as you said, there's a start of something. here. And, I'd like to see maybe some future collaborations in the form of maybe workshops at the conference. I could see that. Maybe there'll be a small group of people and we'll have a regular, quarterly webinar. That might be possible, quarterly discussion group session, something like that. So if you're not familiar with BSA, go to botany.org. You can get familiar with the society. And there will be a survey coming about this event. Since it's the first time we've done something like that, we like to get some feedback. We all like data. So we want that data. And just thank you all for your time and have a wonderful weekend.
One more thing, I want to thank the Botanical Society of America for giving us this platform for this discussion. And Amelia, thank you for all the details and all the little tasks behind the scene.